guys, my name is Gabrielle Van Zant, and the article I'm going to talk to you about today is called Window to Save World's Coral Reefs Closing Rapidly. This article was published on January 4th, 2018, and the author is Michael Greshko. A little bit about Greshko is that he has a master's degree in science writing from MIT and a bachelor's degree in biology from Vanderbilt. He enjoys writing online science news stories about animal behavior, space, and the environment. So now moving on to some key points here. So my first key point from the article is that coral reefs play vital roles in the health of the ocean, society, and science. So coral reefs are basically the tropical rainforests of the ocean and are home to more than 25% of marine life and more than a quarter of all known marine species that spend at least some time of their life cycle in the coral reefs. Society-wise, 500 million people depend on coral reefs for food and fishing. And in contribution to science, coral reefs can tell us more about the climate in the past by looking at the different layers of the coral. So now moving on to coral bleaching and the recovery period. So coral bleaching is when the coral becomes stressed from unusually hot waters, and this causes the coral to basically short circuit and expel its algae from the inside, leaving behind white skeletons. This is a protection mechanism for the coral, but without algae, the coral will starve and die. That's why coral needs time to recover due to bleaching, and recently the recovery period has shrunk by a factor of 5. To put this more in perspective, in the 1980s, reefs could expect 25 to 30 years of recovery time between stressful episodes. Now, abnormally warm waters come once every 6 years. Therefore, there's not enough time for coral to recover. In this figure up here, it says the condition of coral at the top. It shows us the different severity levels of affected bleached coral. So in the red is severely bleached, which is over 30%. Moderately bleached is 1 to 30%, and healthy reefs is under 1%. So now moving on to some of the affected reefs that were talked about in the article, is one of them is the Great Barrier Reef, which in 2016 and 2017 bleached back to back for the first time in record history and killed 2/3 of the coral. In the Christmas Islands of the South Pacific island nation of Kiribati, it was plummeted for 10 months straight by warm waters, and this resulted in 90% of the coral's reef dying. So now moving on to climate change and the dangerous spikes. Despite climate change's influence, there is not a clear relationship between the number of bleaching events and the amount of long-term warming in the Earth's ocean. To put that in a better way, it's not really, coral is not slow cooked, instead it's flash fried in short-term spikes. And the studies that recently were taken in this article suggest that climate change makes the strikes more likely and deadlier for the coral. So now moving on to action must be taken by society and the government. So we need to reduce heat trapping gases, such as coal is one of the biggest leading factors that's trapping the heat. And we also need to lessen our local fishing, because by killing off overfishing, we're killing off the animal life in the reefs. So that's not good. And the article also proposed that our government should try to do more, such as maybe creating heat-resistant super coal, or having reef nurseries to help facilitate more reef growth. And for my last point, the window to prevent exponential damage to the world's reef is closing. That is that we only have a very limited amount of time before this process is going to be irreversible, and this is the short window. So we have about a few decades, but we have to make the change now for this to be a viable change. So now moving on to the reflection portion. Personally, I would consider myself well-roundedly exposed to new stories on the health of Earth's oceans from day to day. And a few outlets I use to keep up to date about the health of the Earth's oceans, climate change, and societal impacts of extreme weather events are CNN, NPR, National Geographic, NASA's Climate Change and Global Warming, Twitter, and Facebook. And this image I put right here, just how I was talking about bleaching in my previous key points. This is previous, before bleaching, and this is after. So you can see it's very dead. And now moving on to a couple questions I have for you guys is, what is coral bleaching? Please explain. What is one factor caused by humans that contributes to coral reef death? What percent of the ocean is covered by coral reefs? And how long do we have to prevent exponential damage to coral reefs?